Welcome to Resist the Empire, a libertarian view of the Star Wars universe. This is your one-stop shop for news, events, and topics in the Star Wars canon. From a libertarian perspective, here are your hosts, Brian McQuaid and Roger Paxton.
Welcome to Resist the Empire. My name is Brian McQuaid.
And I'm Roger Paxton.
Roger, how you doing tonight?
Fantastic. How are you, sir?
Very well. I'm wearing my "To Fly for a Jedi" shirt that you got me. I'm pretty excited about it.
Nice. Yep. Yeah, I can't quite fit in mine yet that you got from me, but I'm getting there.
You're getting there.
Yep.
You're getting there. This is our 7th episode. In my mind, this is going to be titled "The Awesomeness Awakens." So I was listening to Brian Sovereign on Sovereign Tech.
Yeah.
And he was talking about BCIs, which is like brain-computer interfaces. And the first thing that came to my mind was Aura Singh. She's got that antenna that comes out of her head, which I always thought was really cool.
That is cool.
And I actually looked her up on like Wikipedia because she's not human, but it says like near human is like her description, which I thought that was pretty interesting. So I don't know how tied into like the internet she would be, but you know, when he was talking about this subject and when I think about someone like Aura Singh, I think of like how dangerous that could be,
but how cool at the same time.
Oh yeah. First, very awesome,
right.
But like I'm always like assessing risk. And so for me, it seems like that would be a huge risk. Like if you got like a virus, like
right.
Would that like scramble your brains up to where you'd just be totally gone?
And you mentioned that, and of course, in the last episode that we reviewed for Rebels, and then of course the new one we're doing tonight, Sibo has that Imperial implant in his head, and it really seemed to mess with his head quite a bit, quite heavily. So I could definitely see that being an issue for sure.
Yeah, we mentioned him on the last episode of our Rebels review. He's got that like that Lobot headset looking thing on his head.
Right.
Yeah, so very curious, and he was definitely feeling the effects and being affected by this, contraption on his head. So,
and make sure to go give Brian Sovereign at Sovereign Tech some love. We're actually doing some advertising for this show over with his awesome technology related podcast. So definitely go check him out and give him some love from us.
Yeah, so we got a lot of listener comments and emails this week. I'm pretty excited. We're getting a lot of feedback from our listeners,
which is just, I love feedback, so that's fantastic.
It's thrilling, and actually, it's great for us because especially at the top of the show, it kind of gives us a little chance to do some back and forth, So from Facebook, Jason on Facebook was talking about how Filoni said after the first couple episodes for Rebel Season 4, they're not going to be doing the single episode stories.
Which is fine. I love that.
Yeah, that's nice. So we're going to get more overarching plot points and stuff, which I guess now that we're kind of coming down to the end of it, it makes sense that we would be doing this.
They've got a lot of stuff to tie up, sure. And it's great to see that they're getting very serious about tying those things up.
Yeah. Yep. So, and then another comment on Facebook. This was from a while ago. This was from Ben S. He had a question on if the Republic or the Separatists line up better with libertarian ideals. And I'd like to put a 2-second answer to that, but I actually really like the idea of this to explore more in depth. I kind of want to get into the weeds on this a little bit, and then maybe revisit this topic.
Well, and the lines are so gray too that it really needs some in-depth, looking at it because, from a certain perspective, neither one of them are wholly good or wholly bad. So it's definitely going to take some finesse.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then I said earlier we had a few emails this week. So first we have from Mad Philosopher. He had some comments on the Boba Fett Galaxy's Smallest Political Quiz that we did in the 3rd episode. And he said, isn't it the case that a common answer for ANCAPs or libertarians provided when asked about contract enforcement and criminals as either tort or bounty systems, ignoring the fact that Fett took a contract on someone who ostensibly committed no real crime, like Han Solo, would the use of force be appropriate when apprehending a criminal who violates property rights? So, and this was, as it pertains to Boba Fett specifically. So when I was talking about the use of force, at this time for during the quiz. I can understand that side of the argument, but as far as the bonus question goes, the use of force, I was specifically thinking about the episode where Ventress was helping him and some of the other bounty hunters. They were smuggling a chest from one spot to another on that train.
Right.
And when they knocked it over, that little girl came tumbling out, and she was obviously kidnapped. And so that part there, that actually started Ventress's path away from the dark side. And if you read Dark Disciple, it actually references this episode. And but Boba Fett, he wanted to continue on with that mission, knowing at that time. That's exactly what I had in my mind when we were answering that bonus question. And I'm sure there's some other but he makes a good point.
He does make a good point. Obviously we don't know how a true libertarian society would handle things like, property crime and things like that. Robert Murphy, wrote a really good pamphlet called Chaos Theory that you can get for free on the internet. It's like 50 or 60 pages long. And he goes into, court systems and police and how those sorts of things could be handled in a true libertarian society. And it's pretty fascinating because it really, woke me up to the fact that, the way we do things does include a lot of force.
Yeah.
You forcefully take somebody away, you forcefully throw them in jail, you do a lot of things. And this kind of explores ways that we might could get around that. Maybe having voluntary prisons, maybe banishing, criminals from certain society, things like that, instead of using force against them.
Yeah.
So it certainly brings up a lot of good points there. So definitely check that out. And also Murray Rothbard's For New Liberty kind of looks into some of those issues as well.
Yeah. So that was cool. That was a nice email. Thanks, Mad Philosopher. Yep. And then we also got from BGL Boy. He says, I think you should try to compare the libertarian nature of Han to the libertarian nature of Malcolm Reynolds from Firefly. So that's another one where I like that idea. I think it's pretty cool.
That would be awesome.
So maybe we can, now we already did Han on the Galaxy's Smallest Political Quiz.
Right.
Maybe we'll just surprise everyone to just do one on Malcolm at one of these days. It's not even a Star Wars character, but I definitely want to explore that a little bit more. Yeah. And anybody that likes Star Wars, it's easy to see how you would like Firefly.
Of course. I mean, the genres are very similar, that whole space opera kind of thing. And of course, there's a lot of similarities between Han and Malcolm. So.
And space, Western, because I mean, he was very, Malcolm Reynolds is very like that. So that was pretty cool. We might do that in the future. And I just want to say thanks everyone again for your questions and comments. We really appreciate, you taking the time out to send us those messages. We can't always get back to you guys, but we definitely read everything you send, and we appreciate it. We love the interaction, so thank you guys.
And if it's a particularly good question, you'll hear about it here on the show too, which is awesome.
Tatooine Times. Here's the latest news you need to know from the Star Wars canon movies, TV shows, books, comics, and more.
Yeah, so a couple tidbits here before we get to any linked material. First off, Episode 9 release date. It's a departure from December, finally.
I'm glad to see.
Yep, May 24th, 2019. So we're getting back into the summer releases. We're both pretty excited
as
about
much
that,
as I'm super excited about a summer release. Could they not have done May the 4th? I mean, come on.
It's so close, right? It's 20 days, guys.
Right.
Come on.
Yeah, they could have made that happen, surely.
It's a good bit of ways. Maybe they move it up.
That'd be great. Yeah. I mean, why would they not, though? I mean, how could they not?
20 days, guys. And then next I got on the list here, Scargate.
Yes.
Did you see anything about this? Or?
Oh, yeah, I've seen several things about it. I didn't notice it when I first saw the trailer. I didn't hear about it until later. I like Ryan's answer. Hey, it just looked cooler. I mean, I love that.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, it didn't take long for people to obviously dissect the trailer that we saw. In fact, we did it ourselves. But one of the things going around was, hey, why did Kylo's scar move? Right. So if you look at Episode 7. And then the Episode 8 trailer, we can see that the scar moved from what was essentially coming straight down, almost on the bridge of the nose. It's kind of moved off to above his eye,
right?
And it is obviously not nearly as awful looking as I guess you would expect after what we saw happen at the end of episode 7.
It almost reminds me of the scar of, oh goodness, the little guy in Game of Thrones. My mind is totally
Tyrion.
Tyrion,
yeah.
Right, because in the book, his face was so disfigured and so horribly mangled.
Yeah, lost part of his nose and stuff.
Right,
yeah.
but in the movie, they didn't go quite that far because it just would have looked bad. So it's kind of the same thing, I think.
Yeah, so anyways, that was it. He essentially, so Ryan Johnson, he moved it, and what his explanation was on Twitter was, it was my decision to slightly adjust it, and that was my justification. It honestly looked goofy running straight up the bridge of his nose. and as you can imagine, that went over real well.
Right.
There were obviously people that are like, really, we're already messing up continuity and all that. And then that kind of leads us into the next thing, which we do have a link for, is Ryan Johnson will no longer be involved with episode 9. So no details on whether or not this is related to Scargate. So obviously it has little to do with that, I'm sure, but this does bring up some concerns.
Sure it does. Yeah. I mean, he was going to be the guy to carry it through, through episode 9. It makes me wonder if they're just very dissatisfied with what he was putting together with some of his ideas. But they all seem to be very, all buddy and happy with him at Celebration. So I'm very confused by this, frankly, and it definitely gives me concerns. It makes me wonder, are they changing things at the last minute that they didn't like that Ryan was doing, which is going to have a major impact? Or did they, just basically tell Ryan to change things? I don't know. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit about this before the show. Now, he was originally supposed to provide the story treatment, which is pretty much like the outline or direction that the movie was heading in going into the next one. But now that it doesn't look like, he's involved in any capacity, the questions are, why is that? Yeah. Now, that's the first reason, which we just discussed. Maybe they didn't like the direction it was going. The other thing that just came to my mind is this specifically related to Princess Leia? Is this one of the reasons this is completely changed things?
Right. Maybe he wanted to go one direction with Leia and they wanted to go another, and creative differences, and here we are. I mean, that's certainly a possibility too. Yeah.
So it might have something to do with that. The next article I have here, Disney creating Star Wars Starship luxury resort and experience attached to Disney Hollywood Studios.
Yeah, when I saw this and sent it to you, dude, I cannot tell you how excited I was. I can't wait to take my boys to this. I absolutely can't wait.
Yeah, this looks great. So Disney is surveying guests about a possible Star Wars resort hotel experience at Walt Disney World, which would take place on an actual Star Wars starship. The survey is not being conducted by Disney, but rather by a contracted third party. The survey includes concept art, many details of what these experiences would be.
And that's the key for me, is that Disney would not... I mean, they obviously mentioned it's a third party, but Disney's obviously pretty serious about this to develop concept art.
Yeah,
because concept art's not cheap to develop.
Nope.
So,
and then they had to go and hire, some other group to go ahead and look into this more too. Yeah, so that's good news, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So as of right now, the experience would be priced at roughly $900 to $1,000 per guest. In summary, the experience would include 2 nights in an immersive luxury resort that looks and feels like a Star Wars spacecraft. Set check-in and check-out dates so everyone's immersed on the same story timeline. So there's kind of going to be like a story theme going on. Rooms that accommodate up to 4 people with an interactive view, galaxy, or pool atrium. So that looks pretty neat. Every meal from checking in on day 1 to checking out on day 3, 5 meals total, including 2 buffet breakfasts, 1 lunch, and 2 signature dinners with evening entertainment.
And let me tell you, Disney, when they do signature dinners, those are fascinating. I mean, we went to several of them, like the Be Our Guest place for the Beauty and the Beast castle. Fantastic dinner. So they're going to do it right.
Yeah, and can you describe? So what is that entertainment? So while you're there eating, what are they doing during that Be Our Guest? Singing?
So the rooms that we were in during the Be Our Guest, it was the tower, the place that they weren't supposed to, that Belle wasn't supposed to go in the movie. And so they had this painting that ripped itself and had the scar. I mean, just all of this stuff. And of course, they had characters walking around, and it was incredible.
Yeah. So, and that's kind of what I thought. And I asked you because I think that it will be great to have Not necessarily like a Mos Eisley cantina, but some kind of, we got singing going on, or, some kind of singing show like we get either there or we get in like Jabba's palace, that kind of thing would be pretty neat.
Mos Eisley cantina. And since they obviously own the material now, that would be so cool to have a dinner or even have just a lunch in Mos Eisley cantina.
Yeah. Yeah. So what else does this have? It's got 1 day of Walt Disney World theme park admission to Disney's Hollywood Studios to visit Star Wars themed land on day 2, which we're all looking forward to. And then story-driven entertainment that unfolds over the course of your stay, including live character chance encounters and the opportunity to watch or engage in the story through things like personalized secret missions, flight training, starship exploration, and lightsaber training.
Yeah. So my kids did the Jedi training at Disney World a couple of years ago, and that was so cool to see them on stage with these characters. It was awesome. So yeah, that times 10 is what this sounds like. I think that this is going to be a no-brainer. I think it's going to make millions of dollars for Disney, and it's going to give the fans what they want. Fans like us want that kind of immersive environment. And walking around Disney World is great. You can walk around Disney, and then you get to go to the Jedi training, and then you do but an all immersive 2 or 3 day event.
Yeah, where you're just kind of locked into this world and you're just living this story.
Absolutely,
pretty cool idea.
So when they open this up, we're going to have to go. For sure.
Most definitely. So while this is just a survey at this time, it's worth noting the presence of concept art and the inclusion of the Star Wars themed land in these plans likely means this is a pretty serious project at this point.
I can't agree more. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and then in case you missed it, Hera Syndulla's fate and Star Wars Rebels and Rogue One revealed. So as we, and this article's from Star Wars Newsnet. As we already know, the first Star Wars spin-off movie, directed by Gareth Edwards, revealed that Hera and Chopper will survive the final season of Rebels since they both appeared in Rogue One. With the announcement of the brand new 2D animated shorts focused on the heroines of Star Wars, Forces of Destiny, we are going to get brand new canon stories from characters like Leia, Ahsoka, Jyn, Rey, and of course Hera Syndulla. This is an absolute win for Star Wars and is an opportunity to showcase the bad females in the galaxies. So one of the most interesting bits of information in this announcement that we somehow overlooked, blame the Star Wars Celebration excitement, and this is them speaking, not me, is the fact that we get some solid confirmation that Hera Syndulla is going to make it out of the events of Rebels and Rogue One and will actually survive all the way to the Battle of Endor in Return of the Jedi.
That's
awesome. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's gonna,
and there's always been that speculation. Of course, they called for General Syndulla over the intercom in Rogue One, but that could have been her father as well. Her father was General Syndulla, and then of course we hear at Celebration that she's going to get a promotion to general, so we know it's talking about her at that point, which is just really cool. So it's great to see that at least some of the characters survive. Obviously, not all of them are going to be able to, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think we're going to lose an Ezra or a Kanan.
Yeah, it's quite possible. And then they found this out and this was the excerpt from Entertainment Weekly when it talks about Forces of Destiny. It says, Rebels will intersect with the original trilogy in another short that features alien pilot Hera joining Leia and Han on the Ewok world of Endor during the time of Return of the Jedi. So that's kind of where they pulled that from.
That's great.
Kylo Ren enforced Order 37 to copy Darth Vader, and it started everything. So this is from theexpress.co.uk. And it says, Order 37 is described in Wikipedia as follows. Order 37 was one of a series of contingency orders that the clone troopers of the Grand Army of the Republic learned when they were being trained on Kamino. It dealt with using a large amount of civilian hostages to force the capture of an individual. It involved suppressing local civilian populations, including mass civilian arrests and civic lockdowns, and then issuing an ultimatum. If the local populace does not turn over said individuals, all the arrestees will be executed. Order 37 resembles the standard way to suppress a group and force them to reveal a wanted individual under eventual threat of death. It was executed the first time Kylo Ren appeared on screen. During the harrowing scenes at the village on Jakku, where he confronted Luke's ally, Lord Santekka, Kylo Ren has rounded up the innocent villagers and will kill them unless Lure reveals the map to Luke's location. And then he does that. And then even once he discovers that the map eludes him because he didn't have it. He still kills everyone anyway because he's
Kylo Ren, right? Of course.
Yeah. So. Yep.
The HoloNet, your news source for current real-world news with a libertarian Star Wars twist.
So scientists have discovered a worm that eats plastic bags and leaves behind antifreeze. So this is from QZ.com. The waxworm, a caterpillar typically used for fishing bait and known for damaging beehives by eating their wax comb, has now been observed munching on a different material, plastic bags. Scientist Federica Bertaccini of the Institute of Biomedicine and Biotechnology of Cantabria in Spain first noticed the waxworm's plastic-eating skills when she was cleaning up a waxworm infestation in one of the beehives she keeps at home. She put the worms in a plastic bag, tied it closed, and put the bag in a room of her house while she finished cleaning the hive. When she returned to the room, they were everywhere. Bertaccini said in a statement, they'd escaped by chewing their way out of the bag, and fast. So what they did then was they tried to look at whether the worms were eating the bag just to get out or whether they were eating the bag to eat it. So the researchers pureed some worms and left the paste in contact with the plastic. After 14 hours, about 13% of the plastic was gone, suggesting that some compound in the worm's digestive system was truly digesting the bag.
Wow.
The researchers also scanned the chewed-up bags for residue and found ethylene glycol. The main compound in antifreeze was left behind, confirming degradation. So
it is literally digesting and creating byproducts from plastic bags.
Yeah, so
I wonder if this is a product of evolution, since obviously we've been polluting so much plastic the last several decades in the world. Certainly that's a product of evolution, of them saying, hey, there's this plentiful food source, let's find a way to use it, and so their body did.
Yeah, I mean, that's a possible theory. I mean, maybe it didn't used to, they didn't used to be able to do that, now they can, or maybe they've always had that ability, but it's only now that there are plastic bags available to chomp on. So basically, once the solution's worked out, perhaps cities across the world can stop taxing on bags or charging extra for bags. Right. And then of course you can't help but think about the Sarlaac worms when you think about worms eating things. Right. As far as the Star Wars universe is concerned, and do they just eat anything?
Well, it certainly seemed that way because a lot of stuff fell into his mouth.
Right.
I mean,
I don't know if do they not have a mechanism for getting some stuff out that they don't need? Because it doesn't appear that way. All the little hook things are going inwards. It's pretty much just we'll take anything, just chuck it down.
Maybe
here.
Off screen, the Sarlaac kind of coughed up a hairball or something. I don't know.
And then the other one I think about is the space slug, which was enormous in size. Obviously, the Millennium Falcon was sitting inside this thing. It almost makes me wonder if some things are so small on such a level where it's very easy for something like that to digest. Maybe in their universe, they don't need to just dump their waste into space off the ships. They can maybe download it into the Sarlacc pit or in the space slug, and we get rid of our trash that way instead of just burying it in the Star Wars universe. Yeah. So there was this was really sad, this story. So a teenager was refused a lung transplant because he smoked marijuana. He dies after failed surgery. So I found this in the International Business Times. A teenager who was denied a lung transplant because he had traces of marijuana in his system has died after failed surgery. Riley Hansey, 19, from Salt Lake City, needed a double lung transplant after a battle with a heavy flu led to pneumonia, before he then contracted the rare fatal lung infection in November 2016. Despite being described as a healthy teen who enjoyed both winter and summer sports, including cycling and skiing, both of his lungs collapsed 10 days after being admitted into the hospital. Hansey, who was working in Utah for his brother at a ski resort, needed emergency surgery and was placed on the transplant list by the University of Utah Hospital. But tests showed traces of marijuana in his system, causing the hospital to cancel planned treatment and leaving his parents and 3 siblings stunned. The ban on surgery was upheld despite clinicians at the University of Utah Hospital, warning that Hansi would die if they did not proceed with surgery. And then they added, per a statement, "We do not transplant organs in patients with active alcohol, tobacco, or illicit drug use or dependencies until these issues are addressed, as these substances are contraindicated. Yeah, thank you. Contraindicated for a transplant."
Yep.
But on Saturday, Hansi passed away following complications from the surgery, reported the Mirror. Before the teenager died, Hansi's father, Mark Hansi, remained adamant that his son was not a frequent cannabis user and claimed the doctor at the hospital had been less than considerate when explaining that his son would die. He alleges a doctor told his son, "You will die, you better get your affairs in order," at which point the teenager broke down in tears. So I actually had this in our notes for this episode fairly early in the week, and then he was still alive at that time. So he ended up getting transferred to Philadelphia, and they were going to take care of it there. They were like, "Well, we're going to do it," but he didn't end up surviving, and that's a shame, because had this been done earlier, there wouldn't have been a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think that absolutely the family has a lawsuit on their hands here, and this is such a shame. Part of this is the whole issue with the transplant lists and all of that, and how it's handled today by government and the government issues with it. You know, if we were in a truly free market society, and I actually did a Lava Flow episode on transplants, in a truly free market society, there would be we would have many more lungs and things that we have, because people would be willing to sell. I've got 2 healthy lungs. I need a bunch of money. I'm going to sell one of my lungs.
Yeah.
Or families I would much be more willing to give my lungs when I died and give my eyes or whatever else, because there would be some financial incentive for my family. Yeah. Right now, there is no financial incentive. So you need that financial incentive in a libertarian capitalist society, and that would remove a lot of these issues that we're facing today. This kid wouldn't have had to have been on a list and waiting. There would have been lungs waiting for him.
Yeah, you make a really good point there about, so if someone passes away young, say they were in a car accident, so much of that person's body, if they, are willing to do so, they can donate, but there's always there's time restraints, they need to get these items as quickly as possible. Without all the red tape there, they'd be able to get it to someone who's in the area, who lives in the area or whatever, that desperately needs it. Instead of hold on, we got to check the list and let's call this person. Oh, they're on the other side of the country, this kind of thing.
Government inefficiency definitely plays a part. Yeah. But I think that that financial incentive would be a huge indicator for people it would be a huge incentive for them to do it.
Sure, absolutely. Why not? I mean, again, in the same scenario, someone that's young, if they are, if you can get X amount of money that goes to the family, well, now all of a sudden the burden of funeral costs, goes down significantly. Mm-hmm. That's always one of the big things. Someone young pass away, you're not expecting it, you don't have the finances to cover it. Right. Well, now, some of that is covered because we were able to donate. So now somebody's getting help, and then the family who lost their loved one, there's not as big of a financial burden all of a sudden out of nowhere.
Absolutely. And this is just a terribly sad story. And going back to the issue with this hospital, I mean, I understand that the hospital has a policy for that, but if they don't have a policy in place to do something to save this kid's life after they basically just throw him out on the street, for lack of a better term, then I think that they're complicit in this. I think that is horrible, because who's to say this kid smoked a joint? He could have been hanging out with a friend of his who was smoking a joint and marijuana got into his system. So basically, they gave this kid a death sentence for. Basically, even if he smoked a joint, for smoking a plant.
Yeah. I mean, now in this story, the father says that, he did know that his son smoked it. All right, fine. That's fine. But my point here is this is not what caused the issue. Right. The impression you get is the policy is in place because of an addiction to an issue that caused the particular issue. So, you have liver problems because you're a heavy drinker. Well, obviously, that's why their policy is in place for that. The marijuana did not cause the pneumonia. Right. And that's where the big failure is here.
This was somebody, just who wanted to have some authority and basically caused a kid to die because of it. Yeah. And that's heartbreaking. And if that were my family, I would absolutely be suing. Yeah. Absolutely.
So, white man gets 15 years for shooting 5 black men at protest. This is from the StarTribune.com. A white Minnesota man who was sentenced to more than 15 years in prison Wednesday for shooting and wounding 5 black protesters said he'll live with the consequences of his actions for the rest of his life, but stopped short of apologizing. Alan Sarcella, a sentence of 15 years and 2 months, was short of prosecutors' request for the maximum 20 years, but within state guidelines. The 25-year-old Bloomington man was convicted in February on assault and riot charges for shooting the 5 men at a Black Lives Matter protest encampment outside a North Minneapolis police station following the fatal police shooting of a black man, Jamar Clark, in 2015. The only victim who testified at the sentencing was Clark's cousin, Cameron Clark, who was shot in the foot and leg. He suggested that Scarcella got a break that a black man would not have gotten. If that had been me, I would have been looking at 25 to 30 years for shooting 5 white people, Cameron Clark said. And I agree with Clark here.
Absolutely.
So there's been a good bit of news lately regarding the basically gender wage gap myth. Many people wildly exaggerate the treatment of women and minorities in regards to pay in the workplace, and that it's just not true when you look at it on a scale of people in the same industries and this type of thing. But what people are completely disregarding is the real injustices that take place on a daily basis in our courts. Yep. Studies have proven time and time again women get more lenient sentences for the same crimes as men. Black women get less lenient sentences than white women. And black men overwhelmingly have stronger penalties in jail time than white men for the same crimes.
And, it's funny that you mentioned that because this goes back to the issue of cocaine. The varied differences in sentencing for powder cocaine versus crack cocaine.
Yep.
They're both cocaine.
Yep.
White people predominantly use powder cocaine.
Yep.
Black folks use crack.
Yep.
Crack has, sometimes 5 or 10 times the sentencing harshness than powder cocaine. There's no doubt that our justice system is absolutely not colorblind. Yeah. There's a lot of racist issues in our judicial system, without a doubt.
Yeah, there are plenty of studies. I mean, plenty. I just did a quick web search, and there are studies for over the past decade that continually point this out, that there's definitely different treatment between the races, and that's where the real injustice lies. So I think people really need to focus more on something like this as opposed to the pay wage gap thing. So this had me thinking about the Empire. They have an obvious white male bias to their forces, right? We see this change a bit in Force Awakens. Now we see in Force Awakens there are women, we see there are people of other races. But it's still speciest.
Right. And the Empire was, strongly speciest, of course. They slaved Wookiees and enslaved a lot of races or species, but they were predominant. Well, at that point, I think that the Empire itself was all men, or was all white men, humans. They certainly weren't allowing other species into the Empire.
Yeah. So, and I've got a lot of questions that in my mind that this article brought up about this. So, like, Resistance it's always been filled its ranks with all kinds of different species. Right. I don't know if this is some more subliminal messaging the writers are trying to convey. I mean, it's not even subliminal; it's obvious. Or, the more interesting question for me is, why does the First Order continue its speciest ways even after the significant defeat in Jedi?
And I think that we're going to get a lot more of an understanding of how the First Order came out of the Empire and what led to that, and some further books. I mean, of course, you're getting kind of the end of the Empire and aftermath, and now we're going to start seeing some of the stuff between, what happened to the final end of the Empire leading up to the First Order. And I think that that's going to answer a lot of that. Yeah. Obviously, some things are going to change. Obviously, some things changed before the Empire came around, because now they're no longer using clones. They're allowing, normal, regular humans in as stormtroopers and things like that. So I think we're going to see that same transition and what led into the First Order as well. And I think it might answer some of those questions.
Yeah. I hope to see that because, I mean, there's obvious, bias here against other species. For what reason that is, I'm not sure. I mean, from some of the books, we, surmise that, the new people for the First Order they're pulling in, they were like children. A lot of them are children of those who previously served the Empire, which obviously they were all humans. So I know that's where some of that comes from, but it's just a big disparity there. So I'm very, very curious about that, and we probably will end up exploring that a bit more later on.
Absolutely.
So quickest we could visit another star is 69 years.
Wow.
And here's how.
Looking at my watch, I don't think I have time.
I got time. I'm living for a long time.
There you go.
So this is from newsscientist.com. Renee Heller at the Max Planck Institute for Solar System Research in Göttingen, Germany, says we could reach and orbit Sirius, the brightest star in our night sky, in just 69 years. This is despite the fact that it's twice as far away as our nearest stars in the Alpha Centauri system, which would take at least 90 years to reach. A private enterprise called Breakthrough Starshot is hoping to send a fleet of small, wafer-thin spacecraft. I can't even help it. I've got to cut away from this for a second. Okay. It reminds me of Monty Python's The Meaning of Life. Have you ever seen that? And the guy's like talking about the mint at the end. Oh. He's like, it's just a wafer.
Right. Oh, terrible. Terrible.
So, wafer-thin spacecraft to visit Alpha Centauri and explore its tantalizing planets.
Tantalizing.
Almost sounds tasty.
Right.
Previous estimates by Breakthrough Starshot have indicated they could reach Alpha Centauri in just 20 years, traveling at a fifth of the speed of light. But this estimate was calculated for a flyby mission, passing by in just a few seconds. That's not much use if you actually want to observe anything when you're there. The spacecraft would need to slow down. Earlier this year, Heller and independent researcher Michael Hipke showed how light from the stars themselves could be used to slow down a solar sail-powered spacecraft.
So they're saying here that we could send a ship to Alpha Centauri in just 20 years? I don't know why we are not sending a
That's for the flyby.
Right, but I don't know why why we haven't already sent a non-manned spacecraft, Alpha Centauri. Can you imagine the data they could get in that 5-second period? That's...
Yeah, it probably comes down to money, or maybe they want to do something more in depth than just the flyby. 20 years on a project for a flyby. So that technique might put Alpha Centauri at a disadvantage for slowing down, as described in this article. Such a mission to put the spacecraft in orbit there around the star Proxima Centauri, for example, would take around 140 years, Heller has calculated. Sirius is 8 light years away, twice as far as Alpha Centauri, but 16 times as bright. So its light would help the spacecraft both speed up and then decelerate when it gets there.
In this, obviously, these kind of missions would have to be multi-generational. There's no way that a round trip, you couldn't send just one group of people. It would have to be multi-generational.
Yeah.
So you're talking now about conceiving and having babies in space, which are things that they've been working on, things that they've been testing. Actually, I think it might have been Brian Sovereign, speaking to him earlier, was talking about an article that he was reading where they were talking about the various ways and the ways they've tested having sex in space, because obviously, with this situation, you're going to have to. Yeah. Now, I would imagine if they're doing a mission for that amount of time, they're going to build a ship that has artificial gravity, because obviously you're not going to be floating around all that time.
Yeah.
And that would make having sex in space quite a bit easier, because that no gravity issue certainly creates problems.
Yeah, absolutely. So now what's interesting here, though, is for this mission, they keep saying wafer thin, so I wonder if that means so we wouldn't be able to man it. We essentially, if we do want to man it and get there this quickly, our technology needs to improve a lot.
Right.
Now, the article talks specifically about the use of graphene, which I've read about before, and it's super strong. They've been introducing it into solar panels. It's a very good conductor for heat and electricity. So they should totally design a ship like the Solar Sailor that we see in Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, because that thing was really cool looking.
It was really cool.
And that's exactly what I picture in my head, because they were talking about slowing down a solar sail-powered spacecraft, and that's what I had in my mind. That would be really neat.
Yeah, that would be really cool to see one of those for in real life, for sure.
And again, it's somewhat thin, and again, you'd be able to deploy that sort of thing, once you're out there. I think it's pretty neat.
Yep.
Which Star Wars canon character will we dissect in this episode of Galaxy's Smallest Political Quiz?
So we've had some questions on whether we're going to do specific characters here, and obviously we've held off on Luke. So we've talked about possibly reviewing him after episode 8, but stay tuned.
Because it definitely sounds like his impression of things is going to change quite a bit.
Yeah.
You know, from when we really last saw him in Return of the Jedi to what's going on in episode 8. So even if we did him now, we'd probably have to redo him after 8 anyway. So.
Yeah, based on what we've seen so far. So we're going to kind of hold off on him.
Right.
If you have a favorite character, though, that you'd like to see, send it our way, and maybe we'll go ahead and review that character.
Yeah, but it can be a character from the books, the movies, the comics, the video games even. I mean, whatever the case may be. We'll do the research and let you guys know how they stand.
Absolutely. So in this episode, we are going to review Lando Calrissian. So this is one of your favorite characters, I believe.
He is.
That makes sense because you're both smooth talkers.
Oh, listen at you. Holy cow. Oh, boy. So we'll start off with the first question. A government should not censor speech, press, media, or the HoloNet.
Yeah, I lean agree here. Lando was a smuggler, and I say I lean agree because he was also an overseer of a city. So I'm not going maybe. I'm going to go agree, but
one thing they had in the Cloud City was they had the intercom that could speak to the whole city. So I mean, obviously they were using that to disseminate information.
Sure,
so,
sure, open, transparent, and that's kind of the feeling you get there anyway when you first arrive at Cloud City. It seems to be a very open and transparent, and it seems like the free market as well at work there as well.
It definitely seemed like a free market society for sure. Next question. Service should be voluntary. The Jedi policy on the warding of children who are force sensitive and the conscription of soldiers by the Empire is immoral.
Yeah, so, and then this one I put agree, and as I expressed in the last point, he's an entrepreneur, and he seems to have a city full of independent, free peoples.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly didn't have slaves there. He didn't, they weren't doing any conscription. I mean, they had people there who wanted to make a buck, and, that's what the whole point of Cloud City was. It was a mining operation for that gas. Goodness, I can't remember what gas it was. Yeah. But they were mining, this gas, so it was a money-making operation.
Yeah.
There should be no laws regarding possession of weapons for personal use.
Yeah, so I tried to look into this as much as I could. I decided to go maybe here. The Bespin Guards were an official law enforcement group, but the rebels seem to be allowed to come in with their weapons when they came in. Right. I didn't see the city people that were there walking around with weapons. I tried to go back and look at that, but
they might have been concealing their weapons.
Yeah, it's true.
Or they might have been in a situation where they didn't feel they needed to carry. Maybe the law enforcement, the security there was good enough that they didn't feel that they needed to carry their own personal weapons. But you're right. He certainly allowed, Han, who he knew already, but he let all of the people with Han bring their weapons with them. Yeah. And then, of course, Luke landed, and he was able to keep his weapons. So, yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, I won maybe, but I could easily see this being an agree.
Mm-hmm. Repeal laws prohibiting adult possession and use of drugs.
Yeah, so I'll go agree here. He was a smuggler. He is a gambler. I highly doubt he'd want to go after something like that. Try to start some kind of movement like that. So many friends of his, or at least acquaintances, he would upset doing something like that.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, he's probably sat at several card games with people doing drugs.
Yeah.
He's probably used to it.
Yeah.
There should be no requirement to register as a force sensitive with the Galactic Empire.
So I went maybe here. He does run a city, and I wouldn't be shocked if he required some form of ID here. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't either. Again, seeing how free this was as people come and go, but anytime you're running a city, he's got the Bespin Guards, which were like this official group. I can see there being one, but without the evidence to support it, I went maybe.
Yeah, I can't really disagree. So that leaves us with a personal score of 80, and we'll move on to the economic. End imperial alliances of corporations and banking cartels. Corporatism is picking winners and losers in the marketplace.
Yeah, so I wouldn't disagree here, and my evidence for this is I've just made a deal that will keep the empire out of here forever. He is a businessman.
He is.
And he's not stupid, right? So if it gives him an advantage, then it seems like he's on board for taking that, which is why I went disagree.
Well, and I can't really disagree with you because just his personality, but I think that in this situation specifically, he really had no choice. I mean, they had him bent over backwards.
Yeah, very likely.
I mean, if he didn't give up, Han and his friends, then Lando possibly could have been killed. The Empire definitely would have taken over the city. But I don't disagree with your premise. I definitely think that he would be okay with getting some graft and some some help from the government.
And this also does go to your point that you like to make all the time, that government is force, as you say. So, and I would go disagree there. Yeah.
End government barriers to intergalactic free trade.
Now, this I do say agree. He's a businessman, so he wants to get his product. He doesn't want it held up. He's selling those gases, that product to. He wants to have no holdups, get it to where it needs to be without being taxed or tariffed to death.
Absolutely. Science and technological advancement should not be controlled or regulated by the Empire.
I agree here as well. He's an entrepreneur. He's, he likely on the cutting edge of technology. So
I'm sure. I mean, Lobot had the thing in his head. Yeah, and, they had some pretty cool tech in Cloud City.
Yeah, and I think back to like some of the gadget things that he was starting his company with, I guess, for lack of better terms, in Clone Wars. When we first meet him in Clone Wars, we see him with some stuff there, and he's got some high tech stuff there as well. So I just don't see it. Yeah.
The career path of individuals and the planetary division of labor should not be dictated by the Empire.
Yeah, so I went maybe here. We don't really have a lot of evidence one way or the other, but I did make a note here. We do see a lot of Ugnaughts doing Ugnaught things. Or
Ugnaughty things.
yeah. Well, I like that because it's actually spelled like naughty without the Y. So I'll say maybe. I don't know that he's put them there. They are known for their mechanical skills and whatnot, so it's just very likely they just all happen to filter in there where they were trying to take C-3PO and break them apart and whatnot. But I went maybe on this one. I don't really know.
Taxation is theft, including sovereign planetary funds taken by the Empire as tribute.
Yeah, so I looked into this as much as possible. I went maybe on this one. We know he has a law enforcement agency, right? It's got to be funded somehow.
Sure.
Is he funding that himself from his revenue? I don't really know. I tried to find it. I couldn't really find an answer to that.
Well, if the city were a free market city, as it seems to be, as it's very possible. Then he would be making money from the proceeds from what was going on in this city. So he could technically do law enforcement on his own. Yeah. However, historically, as we've seen, law enforcement generally is not done that way. It's generally done by some sort of funds taken from the people that are being protected.
Right.
However, it could have been a private contract.
That's what we don't know.
Right. If you want to be protected by this police force, then you've got to, then pay some money. If you don't, then don't.
Yeah. I know that they're an official force. I just don't know how they're funded. Right. That's kind of why I went maybe on that one.
So it leaves an economic score of 60. So, and the bonus question, that puts him, where does that put him?
It does put him in the libertarian spectrum.
Barely. Probably in the bottom corner of that quadrant, right? Yeah. So the bonus question is, does this character initiate force in the Star Wars universe?
Yeah, so I still haven't really answered this in my mind. So while not directly using force, he essentially hands over Han and Group to the Empire. He immediately regrets this, obviously, but only after the deal gets changed on him. So originally thinking, he was only going after, he was only giving them Luke. But I'm not really sure. I think this was done under, like duress.
Well, keep in mind though, fraud is also force.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're fraudulent. Yeah. And when he told Han and Leia, "Hey, let's go have dinner. I've got dinner for you."
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, he was doing that under false pretenses. Yeah. That technically could be considered fraud.
Yeah.
So at that point, I would have to say that was the initiation of force. Yeah. He could just as easily have given them some kind of a hint or a clue, or maybe just outright told them, or done something else with them. I mean,
he had options there, but he didn't really present anything there to them.
He used fraud to get them to go and face Vader.
Yeah. So even though he was kind of under duress there, he maybe could have figured out some way to let them go without maybe bringing trouble on his city. I mean, I'm not sure. So, okay.
Resistance Review, your favorite Star Wars canon movies, TV shows, books, comics, and more, reviewed by our hosts.
Episode 9, Season 1, Gather Forces.
Yeah, and this is always my favorite part of before doing a show is being able to just sit down and watch Rebels again.
Yeah,
I love it every time.
Enjoy it.
Yeah,
we do that before we record too. Yeah. Like right before we record, we'll
that way it's nice and fresh.
Yeah.
So this episode opens up with the Ghost being chased by some ties, and one of those ties is the Inquisitor's tie. Ezra's trying to, while this is all going on, Ezra's trying to find out from Sibo if his parents are alive or dead, and Sibo's still kind of out of his mind with this implant thing. Ezra finds out that troopers did come and they took his parents away from Sibo. Ezra just really confronts Sibo about this, calls him a coward, and says that Sibo's responsible because he didn't help his parents out. And Ezra tells him that he'll never ever be able to forgive him for that.
Yeah.
Then they're trying to get away from these ties, and of course a couple of Star Destroyers, the nav computer's down, Chopper's messed up in this battle, so they're trying to fix the nav computer, and Sibo actually comes over, fixes it, and interfaces with it with the coordinates.
Yeah.
So the Imperials are then able to, right before they take off, the Inquisitor shoots this really cool tracker, and it lands on the hull of the Ghost prior to their escape. Sibo tells the crew they're being tracked because I guess he has picked up the signal from this thing. Chopper finds the tracer on the hull. It's actually on the hull of the Phantom, though, not the Ghost, and he picks that up in a scan. So Kanan has this idea to detach the Phantom with he and Ezra inside to throw the Imperials off.
Yeah, and I mentioned to you while we were watching this, I always like trying to find like flaws in television programs and whatnot, and not necessarily plot holes, but like things that make me go, well, why did they do this? And one of those things here was the tracker. Like, we can have the technology on the tracker that, attaches itself to the ship, no problem. Why don't we just do that with like missiles, So I don't know if that's a problem in the writing.
Right. It would have made a whole lot more sense to have a nuclear bomb on that on that thing that it tracks right to the ship.
It explodes after it attaches.
Right. That would have been so much better.
Yeah. So anyway, Ezra and Kanan, they lead the Empire to the asteroid belt where Hera and Sabine fought off those creatures that didn't look. They didn't like the light. They were giant loaf cats, basically.
Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to name of what those creatures are. So.
Yeah. So if we did, we talked about it on a previous episode, but this was from episode 7, Out of Darkness. Those creatures were originally. So Kanan wants Ezra to connect with the animals like he was trying to teach him previously with the Lothcats on Lothal. Kanan removes the tracking device while he tells Ezra to make some new friends with these creatures. We find out Ezra's having trouble connecting because he's afraid of the truth. In this process, he sends out a force message to Sibo telling him that he forgives him. And when we then see that, this was basically what was blocking Ezra and keeping him from connecting to these creatures. And once he released those emotions, he was then able to connect with them.
Right, and it was all of the stuff clogging up his brain from his parents, and that's he's
a lot of heavy stuff.
Yeah, he's a 14-year-old, 15-year-old kid at this point, and absolutely. So the Ghost crew, we go back to the Ghost crew, and they're working to turn Sibo over to Fulcrum so that they can get the information from his implants. Sibo tells Hera that he knows the fate of Ezra's parents, and Hera says that she'll tell Ezra for him if Sibo will tell her. So then we're back on the asteroid, and the Inquisitor lands with a bunch of stormtroopers. The troopers find Ezra and Kanan with these creatures right behind them. I mean, Ezra and Kanan are just sitting there meditating, and there's just 40
bunch of just standing behind him. Right. That was a great shot too.
Yeah. So the creatures, then of course attack, and they take out most of the troopers, and Kanan starts fighting the Inquisitor. So Kanan's knocked out during this battle, and so Ezra, picks up Kanan's lightsaber and starts battling with the Inquisitor.
He doesn't even get that far, right? He basically just picks it up, and the Inquisitor is like, "Yeah, that's mine." Just kind of forces it out of his hand.
So Ezra then connects with a massive member of the creature, this creature species, and sicks him on the Inquisitor. So that obviously distracts the Inquisitor because this thing was huge. The creature gives Ezra and Kanan plenty of time to escape, and on their way out, they destroy the Imperial ship, which stranded the Inquisitor and the other stormtroopers there.
Yeah, he used Ezra used so much of his force power there that he actually kind of like passed out from it. Yep. So Kanan had to basically pick him up. So we find out that what happened was Ezra tapped into the dark side. He let his anger and his fear call the massive creature, and then basically made him feel cold,
which is what made him pass out.
Yeah. Kanan says he wasn't prepared for that yet because he's progressing so fast. At the end of the episode, Sabine found a hollow picture of Ezra and his mom and dad that she was able to clean up and gave to him as a birthday present from the prior episode. Yeah,
that was pretty cool. That
pretty nice.
So now we're on to episode 10, season 1, Path of the Jedi. And this was a really good episode. I enjoyed this. Yeah. So Kanan wants to give Ezra a real test to find out if he's ready to be a Jedi or not. And so Ezra and Kanan take off in the Phantom, and Kanan tells Ezra to meditate and let the Force guide him. And the Force does guide him, and it guides him to one of these old Jedi temples. And the old Jedi temple that they find is, of all places, on Lothal. And apparently Kanan already knew about this temple on Lothal because he saw it on the hologram, on the holocron.
Yeah, and he had the ship like on autopilot. Right. Yeah,
so they were already going there.
Yeah,
but so then Ezra and Kanan use the Force together to open this temple entrance because it's a huge rock that has to kind of move to open the temple entrance. And Kanan must remain in the entrance hall while Ezra goes further inside to seek, quote, nothing and everything, as Kanan said. Of course, that's what Kanan's master told him. Yeah. So Ezra, thinks Kanan has followed him in any way because he sees Kanan after a bit, and then sees that Kanan gets captured by the Inquisitor, and Kanan is then killed. I mean, he's stabbed in the heart by the Inquisitor right in front of Ezra.
Yeah. So Ezra falls in a crevice trying to escape the Inquisitor, and he basically it's like a drop off of a cliff. Right. Basically, he's fallen for a long time, and then all of a sudden he finds himself back on the Ghost when he lands. He overhears the crew of the Ghost saying Ezra isn't ready and that they won't be seeing him again, and likely. And Sabine says he's just a little kid. He's scared. He's alone. She pities him. They find that he overheard them, and he realizes that he can't be on the Ghost, and that everything he's seeing isn't real. This is like the point where he's like, "Wait, this isn't right. Something's not right here." So the Inquisitor appears on the Ghost and kills Sabine. Like we see her legs, but we basically hear the group calling out, and all we see is like him like being scared and like trying to get out of there. Ezra then falls down against the back of the ship, and the next thing you know, he's back in the temple, in the entrance hall where he left Kanan. He again faces the Inquisitor at the temple. Ezra realizes it's an illusion. As soon as he realizes like this isn't real, it goes away. He goes, the Inquisitor goes to like cut down, and he basically it just goes right through Ezra. Right. He then begins talking to Yoda through the Force. Yoda says he's a guide and leads him, but we obviously know who this is.
Right. Yeah. So we then cut to Kanan, who also is talking to Yoda, in a different part of the temple. And Kanan confesses to Yoda that he's not clear if he's able to train Ezra properly. Kanan believes Ezra's abilities are growing faster than he can teach him, and this kind of goes back to the previous episode where Ezra kind of, tapped into the dark side of the Force to call this creature a bit, and that's, has Kanan concerned that he's not able to keep up with his progress.
Yeah, and he's had his doubts, in previous episodes leading up to this.
He was hoping to give Ezra
to Luminara,
right? So then we're back to Ezra, still being led by Yoda. Ezra said he wants to be a Jedi to get revenge for his parents. This is what he said at first, and to be strong and to make the Empire pay. And so then Yoda starts questioning him about this. You want revenge? That's why you want to be a Jedi? And then, Ezra becomes more clear-headed and says he really wants to be a Jedi to protect his family, to protect his friends, and everyone else, he said. And then Yoda, definitely approves of that much more. And Yoda says, a Jedi you may yet be. I just love the way Yoda talks.
Yeah.
Ezra then sees that this kyber crystal's coming to him. And it lands in his hand, a blue kyber crystal.
Yeah, so what Yoda says here, it makes me question some things, mainly because he says he wants to be a Jedi to protect his friends and families, and it's so close to the wording, I can't help but think of Anakin wanting to save people, And it's not that exact wording, but it's similar to that. So it makes me very curious because
they were questioning when the council was questioning.
Yeah. So I'm very curious about that because that wasn't received so well. So interesting. Anyway.
Well, but this is also a different time. There were 10,000 Jedi then. Now there's a handful around the galaxy.
Sure.
So I guess you can't be as picky. Maybe.
Good point. So after Ezra gets the kyber crystal, he walks back to the entrance hall and shows Kanan his crystal, and he tells Ezra, Kanan tells Ezra it's a lightsaber crystal, and says he wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, he didn't. He didn't know what to expect.
Yeah, not really. He didn't think they were going there for that. Essentially. So they head back to the Ghost, and then it cuts to Ezra working on his new lightsaber for weeks later, and the entire crew. Everybody lent him some like bits and bobs and some pieces and stuff for his saber, and then Ezra finally reveals it to everyone. He gives it to Kanan to check out, and Kanan's like, this is different, but it's Ezra, so it fits him, So yeah, it was a very cool episode. I really liked the temple and what they did with that, how like they used the Force to pull the temple up out of the ground,
right? And
it looked like it was broken rock laying alongside of it, and then just kind of rose up through the ground. I thought that was a really neat design. Really cool.
I think my favorite part of this episode was the fact that the whole crew kind of pitched in to help build his lightsaber. I mean, that's typical of this crew. I mean, they built such a bond, and they're basically a family.
Yeah.
And to see them all just kind of pitch in to help, especially when we had the issues earlier in the episode where he thought he overheard them talking in the vision. I mean, it's clear that he still has some issues and some concerns there, but it's clear that they don't. That they truly trust this kid, and they're so glad to have him on their team, and he's family.
And so. I think it's telling that that's the part where he realized. Like he didn't realize when Kanan was stabbed by the Inquisitor, and then he fell, and then he woke up on the ship. So he falls down this. It looks like 100 feet, off of a cliff, and then wakes up in the Ghost. And even then, he didn't realize it. And it was only after he heard them talking and saying things like that they didn't believe him and stuff. It was only then that he realized that it was all an illusion. Right. So I think that says a lot for how close he's grown with this family.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great. So another great episode down the drain. Thank you so much, Brian. So follow us on Twitter. So we have a Twitter account, and we're putting some things on Twitter every once in a while. And you can follow us on Twitter at resisttheempirepodcast.com/Twitter, or just follow us at Empire Resistor if you're already on Twitter. And don't forget to check out our T-shirts. Really cool T-shirts with our logo on the front, and may the non-initiation of Force be with you on the back. They're $24.95, and they've got them in sizes from small to I think it's 4 extra large. So you can definitely get one in your size, and we get a little bit of a cut of that. So it definitely helps us, keep the electricity running at the studio.
And a couple different colors there too.
Oh yeah, we've got them in. It's a heathered gray and a cardinal red.
Right.
They both look really good. Matter of fact, probably gonna be ordering mine in the next week or two. I can't wait to get mine.
Awesome.
And so until next time,
may the non-initiation of Force be with you.
Thank you for listening to Resist the Empire. Find us online at resisttheempirepodcast.com and on Twitter at Empire Resistor. Never miss an episode by subscribing on any podcatcher or by going to resisttheempirepodcast.com/subscribe. This has been a PAX Libertas Productions podcast.